Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more.
Debbie Turner, just 12 years old, sent out invitations to a dozen friends for her party at 2 p.m. on Saturday, May 12th. It was to be a girls-only affair. She had no desire for any boys to spoil the fun. Especially her twin brother Jimmy, who lately had become a nuisance with his increasingly chauvinistic behavior, culminating in a prank at a recent Girl Guide camp where he and his friends had sabotaged the girls' sleeping bags with itching powder. Needless to say, the girls knew the culprits and were plotting revenge. Debbie found allies in her older sisters Jane, 17, and Angela, 15, who were also fed up with Jimmy's antics and were contemplating how to teach him a lesson. Their chance came when they caught wind of Jimmy's plan to cause mischief at Debbie's party. Despite their efforts to send him out for the afternoon, Jimmy insisted on staying home, so they warned him sternly to stay in his room with his computer and TV. Jimmy's scheme involved manipulating the garden sprinkler system to drench the girls at 3 p.m. while they played on the lawn in their best clothes. However, his plan unraveled when Jane caught him adjusting the timer in the shed. Sensing his mischief, she secretly reset the timer to its original setting, foiling Jimmy's prank before it could unfold. Thus, Debbie's party proceeded without incident, and Jimmy learned the hard way that trying to outwit his sisters wasn't as easy as he thought. She ventured back into the garden, brainstorming suitable payback for her bothersome younger brother. Inspiration struck, and with a chuckle, she returned to the house to confer with her sisters and their mother, Mary Turner. Gathered around the kitchen table, Jane detailed Jimmy's latest mischievous scheme, prompting a disapproving reaction from Mary. Sensing an opportunity for retribution, Jane remarked, "Honestly, Mum, if we don't address his behavior soon, he'll spiral out of control." "I know, dear," Mary sighed sadly. "But what can we do about it? Any ideas?" Jane seized the moment, breaking into a grin. "Actually, I do have a plan to handle young Master Turner. It would make him think twice about misbehaving and provide some entertainment for the girls at the party." Intrigued by Jane's suggestion, Mary smiled and asked, "Oh? What's that?" "Well, as we've all noticed, Jimmy has developed a rather unpleasant aversion to females lately. He's been disrespectful to Angela and me, and I won't tolerate it any longer. He's been particularly unkind to Debbie and the other girls at school. With his latest scheme, I think it's time to teach him a lesson. Let him experience what it's like to be teased and laughed at." "I agree," Mary nodded. "But how do you propose to do that?" "By embarrassing him, preferably this afternoon, in front of the girls he's mocked," Jane explained. "Let's see how he likes it." Not a bad idea," Mary mused. "What kind of embarrassment do you have in mind?" Jane grinned mischievously. "Well," she began, "after discovering his plan in the shed, I wandered around the garden thinking of a fitting punishment. I imagined all of Debbie's friends enjoying the party on the lawn this afternoon. And then it came to me a delicious way to teach him a lesson and humble him at the same time." "Intriguing," Debbie interjected eagerly, eager to see her brother receive his comeuppance for all the insults he had hurled at her in the past. Jane glanced at her younger sister, her grin widening. "What will you and your friends be wearing this afternoon?" "Party dresses, of course," Debbie replied. "What else?" "Exactly. Party dresses. And all of you will look lovely in them. Now, how would you feel about Jimmy joining your party as well?" "Jimmy? You? Why would I want him there? He'd spoil everything." "Well, yes," Jane grinned, "normally he might, but what if he came dressed like everyone else?" Debbie suddenly caught on to Jane's idea and giggled. "You mean wearing a dress? Like us?" "Exactly. Wearing a pretty little party dress. I have something in mind that would be quite delightful for him to wear. I think he'd be so embarrassed, he wouldn't cause any trouble at all." Debbie burst into laughter. "That's a brilliant idea. It would be perfect payback for all the awful things he's done to me and my friends. Jane, you're a genius." Her eyes sparkled with anticipation of finally seeing her arrogant brother humbled. But how do you plan to get him into a dress? Angela asked thoughtfully. I love the idea, but he won't just let us dress him up like a girl, will he? No, of course not, Jane replied. But if our friends Fiona, Liz, and Marilyn come over to help, he won't have much choice. We can easily overpower him, and I'm sure they'd be happy to assist. They're not fans of Jimmy's behavior either. I think they'd enjoy it. That's a good point, Angela grinned. You've really thought this through, haven't you? As always, you're the organized one. Did you say you have something specific in mind for him to wear? Oh yes, Jane chuckled mischievously. It'll be absolutely perfect. Remember years ago when Auntie Grace had that party dress made specially for me as an 8th birthday present? Of course, Angela nodded. You absolutely hated it, and I refused to wear it too. I don't remember, Debbie chimed in. I was just a baby. What was so bad about it? Well, Jane continued, it was very old-fashioned. Auntie Grace chose a style more suited to a 6-year-old. It was a primrose yellow satin party dress with a Peter Pan collar, short puffed sleeves, a row of buttons down the back, and a sash belt that tied in a bow at the waist. And to make it worse, it had smocking across the front, making it look like a baby's dress. But the worst part was she got the size completely wrong and made it 2 sizes too big for me. I was relieved not to have to wear it. I bet. Debbie giggled. So what happened to it? What do you think? Her mother asked with a smile, recalling Jane's initial reaction. I didn't have the heart to part with it after all the effort Auntie Grace put into making it. So, I kept it in the wardrobe until Jane eventually grew into it. By the time I was 10, Jane added ruefully, the last thing I wanted to wear was what felt like a baby's dress. But Mum insisted I wear it whenever Auntie Grace visited or we went to see her. I'll never forget the teasing I endured from the other girls at their parties. I was so relieved when I finally outgrew it and had an excuse not to wear it anymore. Oh, I can't imagine, Debbie sympathized. That sounds terrible. I'm glad Auntie Grace never bought me a dress. Which brings me to my point, Jane continued. I still have that party dress tucked away in my wardrobe. And since Jimmy is so small for his age, I'm sure it would fit him perfectly. Oh yes, Debbie exclaimed, bursting into laughter. That sounds perfect for him. Can I see it? Of course, Jane smiled. I'll show you in a moment. I'm sure you'll approve when you see it. Their mother had been listening with an amused smile, and she chuckled. Well, I must say, it's quite an ingenious punishment, isn't it? He'll be squirming with embarrassment, and the girls will surely relish getting back at him. I've heard from several mothers about Jimmy's behavior at school recently. He's become quite the bully. Sometimes small people are aggressive to compensate for their stature, what some call a Napoleon complex, and Jimmy seems to fit that description. After a pause, she added firmly, all right, Jane, go ahead, but on the condition that you don't physically harm him. I won't have that. Don't worry, Mum, Jane replied with a mischievous grin. We won't lay a finger on him. We'll just bruise his ego a bit. That won't do him any harm, her mother smiled. And honestly, I can't wait to see him in that dress. Neither can I, Debbie chimed in eagerly. She was clearly looking forward to her brother's comeuppance. All right then, Jane took charge. Let's head up to my room and I'll show you the dress. It's really quite charming. With their mother's blessing, the 3 sisters eagerly went upstairs to prepare an outfit for Jimmy that would ensure he never forgot this party. They were experts at this sort of thing, and Jimmy was in for quite the memorable experience. By this time, Jane had become adept at anticipating her younger brother's thoughts, and she was certain that by 3 p.m., he would be peeking out his window, eagerly awaiting the activation of the water sprinkler. She knew that when it failed to start, curiosity would drive him to investigate the shed, which was precisely when she intended to spring her plan. While Jane and Angela assisted their mother in preparing party refreshments, Debbie busied herself with getting ready. Mary lovingly buttoned Debbie into her favorite party dress and tied a white satin ribbon in her hair, creating a bow with 2 tails that cascaded down her shoulder-length hair. Adjusting Debbie's ribbon, Mary remarked, "You look absolutely darling in that outfit, Debbie. So fresh and pretty." Jane, observing with amusement, chimed in, "She won't look nearly as young as Jimmy once we've dressed him up. That little party dress will make him appear about 6 years old, a little girl, at that." The three of them shared a laugh, imagining Jimmy's reaction to being coerced into wearing it. The afternoon was beautiful as Debbie's friends arrived in their finest party dresses, hair adorned with ribbons, exuding the image of sweet little girls. Their mothers sat in the garden, delighted as the girls quickly immersed themselves in lively conversation and party games. As 3 p.m. approached, Jane stood in the garden with Angela and their schoolmates Fiona, Liz, and Marilyn, all sturdy members of the school rowing team, watching Jimmy's bedroom window. True to her prediction, they spotted him peering out from behind the curtain, eagerly anticipating the anticipated prank. Moments passed, and he vanished from view, prompting the girls to spring into action. They hurried toward the garden shed, waiting for Jimmy to emerge. Right on cue, he slipped out of the kitchen door and darted into the shed. "All right, girls," Jane whispered, "let's move." They approached the shed and entered to find a surprised Jimmy with his hand on the water timer. Well, Jane grinned mischievously, "Caught you red-handed. You thought you'd spoil Debbie's party, didn't you, Jimmy? I know you too well these days. I saw you setting that timer, and it didn't take long to figure out your plan. Come clean, were you aiming to give the girls a soaking?" Jimmy realized the game was up and, facing his older sister's stern gaze, knew there was no point in denying it. He shrugged, saying, "If you say so." "Oh, I do say so," Jane replied firmly. "The question now is, what kind of punishment do you deserve? You know you've earned it. Come on, admit it." Again, Jimmy shrugged, uncertain of what retribution Jane had in mind. "I'll take that as a yes," she grinned. "Well, Angela and I have decided to let the punishment fit the crime, as the saying goes." "What do you mean?" said Jimmy nervously. "Well, you were told to stay out of the way and in your room, weren't you?" "Yes. But you didn't, did you? Just now you came downstairs and out into the garden." "Yes, but..." "Well, since you've come out into the garden, you must want to come to Debbie's party, mustn't you?" she grinned. "Well, you're in luck, because we're going to grant you your wish by letting you come to the party. In fact, we insist on it. But there's just one small thing. Since you're now coming to the party, you've got to be dressed properly for it, and since all the girls are wearing their prettiest party frocks, you're going to wear one too. With all the trimmings. We're going to turn you into the prettiest little girl here, and you're going to stay like that until you go to bed tonight. I've already told Mum what you plan to do, and she's given her full approval, so don't expect her to get you out of it." Jimmy gulped. The prospect of being dressed up in a little girl's party frock would be enough to fill any full-blooded boy with horror, and he was no exception. He decided to try and bluff his way out of it by shouting, "If you think I'm going to put on a dress, you can think again. There's no way I'm going to do it, and that's that." "No," smiled Jane, "I think you'll find you have no choice. We're more than a match for you, and if you don't cooperate, we'll just have to make you, won't we? Which would probably be more fun anyway." Feeling like a cornered rabbit, Jimmy stood there for a moment and then, breaking into a panic, he lunged for the door, desperate to escape. But Jane and Angela were more than ready for him, and quickly grabbed him tightly by the arms. "All right then," grinned Jane, "looks like we'll have to do it the hard way. Let's take him up to my room, I've got everything ready for him." "No," yelled the hapless Jimmy, as his two older sisters dragged their squirming little brother out of the shed, across the lawn, and into the house. Realizing what was happening, Mary gave them an amused wave of approval, and then turned to Debbie and her friends to explain what was happening. Jimmy was no match against 5 strapping teenage girls, of course, and soon found himself in Jane's bedroom, where he was held down face up on the bed by Angela and her 3 friends. With one girl holding each of his arms and legs, that left Jane free to do whatever she liked with him, and he knew it. "Right then," said Jane with a grin, "time to change our nasty little brother into a sweet little girl. Let's start by removing his clothes, shall we?" Jimmy didn't stand a chance as she pulled off his shoes and socks, and then unfastened his shirt and trousers before removing them. That done, she pulled off his vest and underpants so that he was left lying there completely unclothed. Jimmy wasn't particularly embarrassed at being unclothed. He was far more worried as he watched Jane open the wardrobe door and take out a particularly cute-looking little girl's party frock. Just as Jane had explained to Debbie earlier, it was a primrose yellow satin dress with a Peter Pan collar, short puffed sleeves, and a long row of pearl buttons down the back. The dress had a sash belt to be tied in a bow at the back, and smocking across the front which emphasized its childishness. Jane held it up and said, "Here we are, little girl, your party frock. Isn't it sweet? I grew out of it years ago, and I was really glad to because it looks so babyish. I hated wearing it, but now it's going to get some use again." Jimmy looked at it in horror, and groaned as she hung it on the wardrobe door ready for use. "Now then," she continued, opening a drawer and taking out a pair of yellow satin knickers, "let's put our little girl's undies on first, shall we? Just hold on to him while I slip them on." The girls kept a tight hold on Jimmy and lifted his bottom up off the bed slightly while she slipped the knickers on over his ankles and drew them up his legs to his waist. "There we are, little girl," she grinned, "aren't they pretty?" while Jimmy looked down at them with utter distaste. "And now for your party frock," she added with a wicked smile. She went across to the wardrobe, and removing the frock from its hanger, she unfastened the buttons down the back and said, "Right, turn him over onto his front while I get him into it." The girls rolled Jimmy over while she went to the top of the bed, next to his head. Despite his struggles, she girls forced his head and arms into the dress, and Jane pulled it down around him. Then while the girls held him down securely, she fastened the buttons up the back and tied the sash belt in a neat non-slip bow behind his back. "Good," said Jane, "now for his feet. Sit him up on the bed." The girls turned Jimmy over so that he was facing upwards, sat him upright on the bed, and spread-eagled his legs. Jane picked up a pair of white cotton ankle socks, pulled them onto his feet, and turned the tops down neatly. Then reaching under the bed, she picked up a pair of shoes and placed them between Jimmy's outstretched legs. Looking inside one, she said, "You take size 3, so these should fit you perfectly. And they're going to look so cute on you." Unfortunately for Jimmy, she was right. They couldn't have been cuter. A pair of white leather Mary Jane strap shoes decorated with pink flowers that fastened with a buckle at the side of the foot. The perfect shoe for a little girl. If he'd been a little girl, that is. Jimmy groaned with humiliation as she buckled them on tightly, making sure that it would be impossible for him to kick them off. These shoes were designed to remain firmly on fidgety little girls' feet. Jane looked at Jimmy's feet and broke into a broad grin. "Oh yes, they look very nice," she giggled. "Now let me see, what else is there?" She looked him up and down for a moment and then said, "Oh yes, of course, little girls love wearing pretty ribbons in their hair, don't they? So." She opened a drawer and took out some yellow satin hair ribbon and a pair of scissors, and carefully cut 2 equal lengths. "His hair's a bit short for ribbons," she grinned, "but not too short, I think. Just take him over to the dressing table and sit him up straight in front of the mirror, will you?" The girls swiftly pulled Jimmy off the bed and ushered him to a chair facing the dressing table. They sat him down upright with his arms held over the back of the chair, ensuring he had no choice but to see himself in the mirror. "Right, hold his head still," said Jane. One of the girls stood behind Jimmy, wrapped her arm under his chin, and held his head firmly. Jane combed his hair with the center part and divided it into 2 sections, securing each with elastic bands. Jimmy squirmed and groaned with embarrassment as Jane took one ribbon and tied it tightly around the base of one bunch in a neat bow. She repeated the process with the other ribbon, ensuring both bows were identical in size. Then she placed 2 white plastic hair slides next to the ribbons and clicked them shut. "There we go," she smiled, brushing Jimmy's hair forward into a fringe. "That's how I used to have my hair done when I was little." "Well, close enough, anyway. All right, stand him up and let's have a look." They stood Jimmy in front of the full-length mirror on the wardrobe, and a chorus of giggles filled the room. It was no surprise, he looked nearly identical to the youngest girl downstairs in the garden, resembling a typical 8-year-old girl. "There we are," chuckled Jane. One little girl all set for Debbie's party. Jimmy cringed at the thought, while the girls stood around him, laughing at his appearance. "Isn't she adorable?" laughed one. "Such a little sweetheart," grinned another. Angela couldn't stop giggling. "Oh, Jimmy, you would have been the cutest little sister." "So what happens now?" asked one of the girls. "Now," grinned Jane, "well, in a moment we'll take our little girl downstairs to join the other girls, but first, I have one more surprise. After all, we can't have him making a run for it, so I've got just the thing to keep him under control." She opened a drawer and retrieved a bundle of white leather straps. Jimmy was momentarily puzzled by them, but as she began to arrange them, he realized with nervous anticipation what they were. "Oh no," he thought, "they can't be," but they were. It was a set of traditional-style white leather baby reins. The chest plate adorned with 3 jingling bells and decorated with a teddy bear and ABC blocks made it clear, these reins were meant for toddlers. Angela giggled with gleeful anticipation at this added humiliation while Jane instructed, "All right girls, hold him steady while I put these on him. He won't be going anywhere in these." She approached Jimmy, holding up the reins. Despite his struggles, the girls restrained him, and Jane swiftly secured his arms in the straps. Moving behind him, she threaded the straps through the buckles and tightened them, ensuring the baby reins held him firmly in place. "How did you manage to find baby reins big enough for him?" laughed one of the girls. "Oh, that was easy," grinned Jane. "They're leftovers from when Aunt Nan had our little cousin Terence over a couple of years ago. Remember how big he was for his age, Angie?" "Big?" Angela retorted. "He was massive. More like a 6-year-old than 3.5. Aunt Nan had these specially made to fit him by a friend who does leatherwork. Terence used to throw tantrums until she used these to keep him in line. He was so embarrassed wearing them that it quickly corrected his behavior. And," Jane added, shaking the reins so the bells tinkled, "I've made these escape-proof. I replaced the buckles with padlockable ones. There's no way he'll get them off now." She took out 3 small padlocks and clicked each one shut with finality. Jimmy realized he was securely locked into the baby reins, unable to remove them or the little girl's party frock underneath without the keys. He was now at the mercy of whoever held the reins, as he was about to discover. Desperately attempting to undo the humiliating restraints, Jimmy fumbled behind him, grasping at the buckles. Jane allowed him to struggle briefly while holding the leading rein tight. Amidst amused giggles from the girls, Jimmy writhed for a moment, managing to touch the buckles. But with each one securely locked, he soon realized the futility of his efforts. He stopped, defeated, like a subdued wild pony. He was trapped, and he knew it. "Done yet?" grinned Jane. Jimmy remained silent, staring at the ground in frustrated humiliation. Here he was, dressed like a sweet little girl with ribbons in his hair and locked into baby reins like a toddler. How much worse could it get? He would soon find out. "There we go," grinned Jane, "that'll keep our little girl in line. Now, let's take her downstairs to meet the other girls." She tightened her grip on the reins and gave them a sharp tug, reminding Jimmy of her complete control over him, akin to handling a mischievous toddler. He nearly lost his balance as she pulled on them, his cheeks burning crimson at his virtual helplessness. With Jane behind him, holding the reins, Jimmy was led downstairs and out through French windows into the garden. A lively reception awaited him. Mary had already briefed the girls about Jimmy's plan to soak them, so their reaction was predictable. If there's one thing little girls excel at, it's teasing little boys, especially when said boy is dressed in a sweet party frock, adorned with ribbons, and sporting baby reins. It was a recipe for humiliation that any boy would dread. As soon as Jimmy appeared, high-pitched laughter erupted, the girls doubling over in amusement with tears streaming down their faces. Then came the playful taunts. "What a precious little girl. Isn't she adorable? And those ribbons are just darling. They match her dress perfectly. That party dress is too cute. Did you get it from the baby section? She must have. I mean, look at those baby reins. And those little shoes. She must be about 3 years old. Did Mommy bring you in your stroller or your pram, little girl? Throughout it all, Jimmy stood there, his face crimson with shame, enduring their teasing and taunting while Jane occasionally tugged on his reins to underscore his new role as a darling little girl. Debbie seemed especially delighted. She kept glancing at her brother, grinning widely, and bursting into fits of laughter. Then she suddenly piped up, "Hold on a sec, we can't call him Jimmy like that, can we? I think we need to give my little sister a new name for today." "What a great idea," chimed in Angela. "Any suggestions?" There was a brief pause before one of the girls said, "I know. I have the cutest baby sister named Lucy." "That sounds perfect for a sweet little girl, doesn't it?" "Lucy," chuckled Jane. "Oh, I like that. All right, girls, shall we call our little girl Lucy for the rest of the day?" A chorus of giggles confirmed the girls' approval, unanimously adopting the new name. Jimmy stood there, groaning inwardly with embarrassment, wishing the ground would just swallow him up. He was certainly paying dearly for his past misdeeds. With his embarrassing introduction complete, the girls settled down to play games in the garden. Jane sat on a garden bench and, pulling Jimmy down by his baby reins, seated him cross-legged on a rug at her feet, where he was in full view of everyone. The girls darted around, teasing Jimmy with relish, finally enjoying their chance to give him a taste of his own medicine for all the teasing and trouble he had caused them in the past. Debbie dashed into the house, and Jimmy's heart sank when she returned holding her digital camera. "Oh no, please. No pictures," he pleaded desperately, but his sister was relentless. This was too perfect an opportunity to pass up. "Why not?" she giggled mischievously. "I need these for my photo collection. Just wait until I email them to all your friends. Especially Jennifer. I bet she'll love seeing these. Now, stay still." His girlfriend Jennifer. Jimmy had completely forgotten about her, and he let out a whimper of helpless protest at the teasing he knew he would endure from her. She had a wicked sense of humor and would undoubtedly make the most of this situation. Attempting to rise, Jimmy was met with a firm grip from Jane, who grinned and held him firmly in place with the reins. Jimmy's face burned with embarrassment as his younger sister proceeded to capture the moment for eternity. He dreaded to think what she might do with those photos. Debbie snapped numerous pictures from every angle until she was satisfied. Grinning at Jimmy, she declared, "There, that should keep you cooperative from now on. I wouldn't want these showing up in your school magazine, would you?" Her chuckle was wickedly knowing, and they both understood the implication. With those photographs, she now held sway over him. Satisfied with her mischief, Debbie trotted over to her friends and proudly displayed the images on the camera's screen. Jimmy winced as he saw the girls erupt into giggles at his expense, their laughter ringing out as they viewed him dressed and restrained like a bashful little girl. With that episode concluded, the girls resumed their play in the garden until Jimmy's mother appeared at the French windows and announced, "Tea time, everyone. Come inside now." "Excellent," Jane exclaimed with a wide grin as she stood up. "This should be entertaining. Up you come, Lucy." She gave Jimmy's reins a tug, pulling him to his feet, and led him into the house. Inside, Debbie's birthday spread awaited in the dining room, just beyond the French windows. The girls had already taken their seats at the table when Jimmy was guided in and seated at the head, directly across from Debbie, ensuring everyone had a clear view of him. Children possess a cunning akin to a pack of hyenas when they sense their prey is vulnerable, and the girls erupted in laughter at the sight of Jimmy blushing furiously with humiliation. It was no wonder they laughed, many of them had endured various forms of teasing from him in the past, and now they were determined to exact their revenge in full measure. "All right, girls," Mrs. Turner smiled, clearly pleased to see her son getting his just desserts. "Time to dig in." And dig in they did. The table was laden with sandwiches, biscuits, cakes, and an endless supply of soft drinks. This feast was followed by jelly and ice cream, culminating in Debbie's birthday cake, a spread fit for royalty. Jimmy found little appetite as he endured a relentless stream of giggles and teasing, paying dearly for his past treatment of the girls. Once everyone had finished eating, Jane suggested, Why don't you girls head back out to the garden? We'll bring Lucy out shortly. With lingering giggles, the girls rose from the table and returned through the French windows to the garden. At this point, Jimmy hoped his torment would end and he would be freed. No such luck. Jane and Angela were determined to teach him a lesson about teasing Debbie and her friends again. Jane said, "Well now, Lucy, you've had your tea. Let's take you outside to join the other little girls." Jimmy groaned as Jane tugged on his reins, leading him to a wide swinging garden seat. She settled him in the middle, with Angela on one side and herself on the other, ensuring he remained under control. There, he endured more teasing until the afternoon sun moved, casting its light directly on Jimmy's face. Angela noticed him squinting and grinned, saying, "Is the sun too bright for you, Lucy? You need something to shade your eyes. I'll fetch it." Jimmy wondered what she meant as Angela got up and disappeared into the house. She returned moments later, holding a pink and white gingham sunbonnet designed for a little girl. She flashed a broad grin as she announced, "This will protect little Lucy from the sun. Let's see how she looks, shall we?" Angela carefully placed the bonnet on Jimmy's blushing head, securing it tightly under his chin with a neat bow. The girls erupted in laughter at the sight. "That's adorable," Jane chuckled. "It fits him perfectly. He looks so sweet with his face framed in that pretty little bonnet, just like any other little girl." With his head adorned in the most humiliating manner possible, Jimmy blushed deeply while the girls reveled in this final, instructive lesson for all the hurts he had caused them in the past. Debbie seized her camera again, capturing more photos of him. His lesson was complete. The party games continued for another hour until the festivities finally concluded, and the young guests began to depart. Each one took the opportunity to bid farewell to the helpless Jimmy, teasing him as if saying goodbye to a little girl. By now, his tough guy reputation lay in ruins, and he knew things would never be the same again. When the last of the girls had departed, Debbie and her sisters faced Jimmy. "Well, Jimmy," said Jane firmly, "have you had enough? After today, I doubt you'll ever think of trying your tricks on the girls again. And if you ever attempt to boss around the little ones, they'll just laugh and remind you of today. And with these wonderful photos of you," giggled Debbie, brandishing her camera, "I suggest you think twice about teasing me again. I know exactly where to send them if you do." She grinned triumphantly, and Jimmy felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, knowing she was right. Jane gently removed Jimmy's bonnet and helped him to his feet, her tone softening. "Come on, little brother," she said kindly, "let's go upstairs. I'll help you out of these things, then you can have a bath, get dressed, and there's still plenty of party food left if you're hungry. I noticed you didn't eat much." "I'm not surprised," Debbie chimed in with a giggle. Suddenly, Jimmy realized that after paying his dues, his sisters had forgiven him for all his past misdeeds. This was his chance to start afresh. Despite the ordeal of the day, he acknowledged that he had deserved it. He decided to accept it gracefully and let go of any thoughts of revenge. It turned out to be a wise choice. From that moment on, he tempered his mischievous and bullying tendencies, making life more pleasant for everyone involved. Sometimes, being tough can lead to kindness in the end.